Hello and welcome back to the Eyes Up Life podcast with your host, Ben Granis. We have a special edition episode this week. Yes, this is an off week. Usually there's no podcast this week, but because it's special, we have one. This is a conversation that I had with my good friend Conor O'Brien. Before I go right into that, I'll give you a little bit of background on Eyes Up, because maybe you're new to the podcast and you have no idea what the heckles I'm talking about. And that's okay. Eyes Up started as a 7,000-mile bike ride around the United States with the goal of ending distracted driving, promoting digital wellness, and helping people live safer, happier, and healthier lives by building healthy relationships to technology. And that is very much still my goal. I finished the ride in September. Since then, have been working on other ways to raise awareness for distracted driving, including interviewing athletes. That's what you've been used to with the Maxxis interview series, doing some public speaking, and just getting outside, promoting the goodness of being away from the phone. Back in February, I had the delightful privilege of going to visit my good friend Conor O'Brien in Maui, Hawaii, where he has been spending quite a bit of time over the last 2 years for winter training for bicycle racing. Conor is an incredible person, a very, very strong athlete, and is extraordinarily passionate about cycling and has been killing it with his races in recent years. He has an exciting race year coming up where I think he's going to do even better than he did in the last year. While I was on Maui, Conor was originally scheduled to do a 192-mile bike ride around the island and up the volcano called Haleakala, an incredibly challenging ride. And he was doing that to fundraise for a foundation called the Emua Family Foundation, which provides services to children in crisis on Maui. Very noble cause, and Conor did a really great job fundraising. We didn't cover this in the recording, but he has raised over $30,000 for this foundation and did an absolutely wonderful job getting the ride done and getting the community involved and maintaining his unending positivity throughout the whole process. Unfortunately, while I was on the island, the forecast for when Conor was supposed to ride was not so good, so he had to postpone it, and we instead went whale watching. So that's okay. I was sad to have missed the ride because I was hoping to do the last leg with him, but that is life. So we had a conversation the night before I left to return to the mainland, and then we had a follow-up after he did his ride. So, spoiler alert, he completed the ride successfully, did a great job fundraising, and I think has become even more fired up about biking and doing it for a good reason. So this is not the normal format talking about distracted driving, but I think it is a pretty cool mix-up and will be an enjoyable conversation. Obviously different too because I know Conor very well. And yeah, enjoy. That's it. We'll talk to you at the end. Bye.
I'm letting you take the lead now.
Yeah,
Cool?
I'm a natural at taking the lead. So usually I have whoever I was talking to introduce themselves, but I think because we already have an existing relationship, I can introduce you somewhat, and then you can add in whatever might be missing.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Fun.
So just some context to start is that we're sitting here in Paia, Maui, on my last evening here after a lovely visit, which didn't go exactly as planned, but we'll talk about why later. But I'm here with a good friend of mine, Conor O'Brien, who lives here. He winters in Maui. He doesn't say that, though.
Snowbird.
He's a snowbird. He's a snowbird. Florida is not where he snowbirds to. He goes to Maui, another warm place. So, Conor, I met through work at Overland Summers I actually met him. When was it? It was back in 2017, and that was when I was just a wee little leader at Overland, and he was in the office. And then a couple years later, I joined the office. He was still there, and we overlapped for a bit. And since COVID, that's sort of when we started biking a lot more together and doing fun things together. So, fun things including coming to visit in Maui. So,
our first bikepacking trip was in COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah,
your first bikepacking
my
trip.
first time ever.
Your first overnight. Was that the Willitown weekend one?
Yeah, we went. Yeah. It was just one night, right?
Yeah, but that, if I recall correctly, was your first time.
First time ever
riding to a campsite,
carrying gear on a bike, and then using that gear to camp.
Yeah, and that was the beginning of a beautiful
friendship. Beautiful friendship.
Yeah.
What did I miss, Connor? I think that pretty much covers it.
Well, it's been fun, I think, staying in touch over cycling-related things. I think that's what's really brought us together. And the fact that we're doing like our own independent kind of out there things, trying to figure it out as we go, which is exciting and been a fun thing to bond over, I think, over time. But I was also part of helping Ben organize his ride across the country.
You can talk to me. We're talking.
Yeah, we're talking. Yeah, I helped you organize a bike ride.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Yeah, that was fun. I read it only recently in my 5-year journal. Well, I guess loosely recently. I think it was the fall or December maybe when you called, and I wrote in my journal, Ben thinking about riding across the country for Text Less Live More, and I wrote that. Yeah.
Yes, I totally left that out of the introduction, but that's actually it was a big part. You were a huge part in planning the Eyes Up ride and helped me get knowledge and experience before actually heading out there, and were a huge resource along the way. And actually, I don't think I've told you this, but in my talks that I give at schools, etc., I show a screenshot of the first communication that I ever sent about the ride, which was a text to you on January 6th, 2021.
It was January.
Yeah.
Wow.
But then you just said I called you, in early February?
No, I can't remember. I thought it was earlier in the fall, but it must have been January, because I'm sure you would have texted.
But you texted me when you read it in your 5-year journal, that call happened.
Oh, I did?
Yeah, it was like not a couple weeks ago.
Ah, that's why it feels so recently.
Right.
Okay, so maybe we had a phone call later.
I probably had started to actually think about it a little bit more seriously.
I think that's what it was. I think it was maybe our first conversation was you riding, and then about the concept of like riding for a reason, and like what was meaningful to you that you could continue thinking about for the entire time you rode your bike across the country, which is a long time.
And to hold me accountable.
Yeah. And both those things, I think, it wasn't obvious to me, but I remember when you said it, it was like, oh my gosh, of course.
Yeah, I think it was the same, like, I kind of thought of partnering with Text Less Live More as like I know some people there. It seems like a pretty no-brainer, and then as things started to progress, it was more and more of like a duh sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that was...
That's why we're friends.
That's why we're friends. No, and you continue to be a big resource. You helped me with a ride that I did today, but a big reason why I came out this year, besides hanging out in Hawaii in the winter, which was kind of fun, was you created a ride of your own for a good cause. So let's hear about that a little bit.
I created a ride. Yes. Yeah. I came into this winter knowing that I wanted to ride the 3 big loops, or the 3 big rides that Maui is known for as a cycling destination, which is one around the West Maui Mountains, one around the East Maui loop around the volcano that is Haleakala, and then going up Haleakala, which is a 36-mile ascent to 10,000 feet. on one road, which is kind of cool. And I've fallen in love with the concept of big rides, as I think you know, having done a few of them in the past and always wanting to find something more, not necessarily longer, but adventurous, which led to building this whole thing out, knowing I wanted to do that this winter, and then coming here. And honestly, also having watched you build your Eyes Up ride, like community, has been very interesting to watch and fun to watch. And part of me is like, oh, I wish I had something like that, and been building this cool thing, which I think inspired me to then think, I could probably figure out a way to rally some community around this ride. Because there are those on the island who talk about that kind of ride. And I think there's a opportunity here to pull the cycling community together around something. So that was an opportunity, and I hadn't linked those two things quite just yet. And then thinking through kind of what you had been doing and wanting to organize a community beyond just the cycling world, it was like, oh, let me reach out to these folks at Amua Family Services, who I had met this December after helping organize some of their Pedal Amua 60-mile ride that they do annually as a fundraiser for Amua Family Services, which is a nonprofit that helps a lot of local families here on Maui, and specifically children on Maui who are in challenging circumstance, whether that's a familial issue or that's a health issue, or anything, a mental health issue or learning development issue, any of those things. They have channels for each of those things to help people on Maui, kids on Maui. And I thought, these people seem pretty excellent. I should maybe link all these ideas I'm having together into one big ride all around Maui for a cause. And that became Cycling Maui for Move Family Services, which is why you came out here.
So, talk about how you got have you done the pedal Amua twice or just once?
Just once. I wasn't here that weekend last December.
So it was December. How did you hear about it, and what was that ride like?
I learned about it a year ago when I first moved here, and it seemed exciting to me at that time, but just couldn't make it work. And then this year, it's the only like organized cycling event on the island. And so how are we?
Good. I was just making sure it didn't stop.
Oh, yeah. First, only organized cycling event on Maui for the year, really, that felt to me like had the most turnout. So I was like, oh, I have to go do this. And also I saw what the cause was for, and it's like, oh, of course I'm on board with this. So I went to do that, and there was a great community that I felt there, among everybody, but I knew that it was organized and put on by the Amua Family Services team. Because I had been working with them to help bring some of Maui's Sunriders, the bike shop where I work in Paia, some of that as a sponsorship thing that they were doing. They needed help organizing it. I became the point person for Sunriders and organizing it for them. Yeah. Where was I?
So what was the ride like? So it was December. You said it was 50 miles? 60?
60 miles around the West Maui Loop.
So that's one of the 3 rides that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What is that like?
It's an unbelievable 60-mile loop around all of the West Maui Mountains. So the first half of that is pretty flat, maybe gently rolling right along the waterfront for a vast majority of it. And then you round the backside of the volcanoes, and it's just like, it's otherworldly. I mean, you've ridden it a couple of times now. It's like rolling up and down green, lush, dramatic cliffs that just fall off into the Pacific Ocean. And for a lot of it, you can't see civilization beyond just the road in front of you. And even that feels pretty old and kind of out there. And it's a very special place that not many get to.
Right, because, you and I rode this last year when I came out to visit. And we went clockwise. We started on the east side of the loop and went clockwise that way. And there's not a whole lot of development on the whole route, but the first half is really going through sort of resorty stuff, and then it ends with the classic golf courses that are so famous in the golf world, and then it just stops there's
Yeah,
like
rather
there's almost
abruptly.
like a line on the road where
Yeah.
it says there's nothing past here.
Yeah.
Because then it's just, I mean, there's some people that live there, but it's mostly
Yeah.
really remote.
Really remote. Yeah, which is very cool. Not quite as remote as sections of the East Maui Loop, which is also dramatic and interesting, which is the route that Ben rode today, as it turns out.
Which was
But
hard.
yes.
Let's talk about that for a second, not talk about myself. But last year when I visited, we did the West Maui Loop, one of the three classic Maui rides. And we also rode up Haleakala, the volcano, which goes from sea level to over 10,000 feet in one go, which is crazy. Just one road that just goes all the way up that high. And this year, well, just today, I rode the East Maui Loop, which is I think for me, it was the hardest of the three. Over 100 miles and over 10,000 feet versus Haleakala, which is, it's 70 plus miles, but it's really 30, what is it, 36?
36 up.
And then you're just having a fun time going down.
Yes, and it's steady, and it's it's the terrain isn't challenging. It's just uphill the whole time.
But again, similar to the West Maui Loop, there's so much change in the landscape quickly, I noticed.
Yes.
And a lot of it's really remote, which is really cool because I feel like people who visit Maui or anywhere that's like a huge tourist destination, it's busy, touristy, obviously, and you don't really get to see the whole picture of this land. So it was really cool to get to see it, and seeing things on a bike is such a cool way to take in the experience because not only are you seeing it at a slower pace than in a car, you're actually experiencing the environment. Like today, it was warm and windy for the first half, and then it was still warm but rainy the second half, and the wind was coming out a completely different direction. So,
well, same direction.
Well, yeah, different direction relative to me.
Right.
But a really, it's you get I mean, compared to like a cookie cutter vacation on Maui, which is going from the airport to whatever your hotel is and maybe like a half-mile radius around that. Such a cool way to see it, I think.
Yeah.
And you've lived here now for, I mean, in total, over 6 months. So, I mean,
In total, about a year, just over. Wow, never thought of it this way.
Is it
Just
over
over a
a
year of total time. Yeah, over 2 stints.
So, what are some? I mean, you've seen a lot of the island, in a large part because of your cycling. So, what have you noticed over your time here, and is anything that's been surprising or really interesting?
Surprise! The wind has been surprising. I will say that.
Well,
here.
let's talk about the wind for a second.
I did not know that Maui is essentially the wind sports capital of the world because of a very consistent wind out of the east, which are the east trade winds that cross the Pacific. Just Maui's right in the way, as it turns out. All of the Hawaiian Islands are, but Maui particularly. So there's a very constant, a little bit less in the wintertime, which my water sports friends tell me, but to me still feels like a lot as a cyclist. So that was surprising. It turned out to be excellent training opportunities, I would say, but makes for interesting ride choices around the island. Yeah. In Paia on the North Shore, the vast majority of my bike rides are into the headwind coming back home. Good mental challenge.
Right. You get both sides of the coin in a pretty extreme fashion.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, let's talk about your cycling career for a second, because a big reason why you're here is to train for races. And what have those been like? Has the wind, for example, played a role in those? And
it's excellent playground for cycling. I think generally in a lot of reasons. One, because I like to do the train to be faster and be able to take on more challenging rides. If that's races, to a degree, yes, I love that competitive element of it. But more so, I love the the opportunity to get out and explore and push yourself and challenge yourself to see more of the world than you otherwise could. And that's where Maui is a unique place to ride a bike in a lot of ways, I think, because you can get an almost equal share of all of those things here if you are careful in the way that you select your rides. Because you can have the most jaw-droppingly scenic, spectacular adventure ride of all time, cruising around some of these loops, which I think you now know to be true. But you can also plan incredibly challenging training rides up and down the volcano, 36 miles of uphill right here to go do, or ride straight into a headwind for a wild turnaround and enjoy tailwinds back home. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how is it? I mean, it's a great place to train. How is the training? Has it felt like you've been well prepared for the races that you've done?
Yes, and I think I attribute a lot of that to just staying disciplined and being passionate about wanting to do those things, and just generally train to to become a better cyclist, because it's my favorite thing in the whole world to do. Last summer took a lot of races very seriously, as you know, for the first time. Did pretty better than I thought I would.
You did really well for your first series.
For first, I will take that. I was proud of it, and it also just reinforced all of the things that were already burning for me from a passion standpoint of like wanting to ride more in different places, and find a way to have that be like subsidized to a degree or build some sort of way of life around it, and feeling momentum in that direction from a success standpoint on the bike, certainly, but then also from a community standpoint in that world and networks that I was branching into and people that I was getting to know, and slowly refining what it is I like most about existing in the bicycle world. And so, I guess to answer the question, if I can think back to what that was, it is, I have felt more success as a result of living here, but it's not just because of the riding. It's also because of the focus efforts to continue building all avenues of that cycling connection.
Including community, and the adventure side of things, which you've said to me multiple times, is some like when after a long racing season, what you come back with as what you're still most excited about with bikes is those sort of those adventures that are coming from just getting out there on a bike in a cool place, not necessarily the trying to win a race.
Yeah. Even as I think back to races that I've done, and I think back to high moments of those races, it is the opportunities to be somewhere cool and do something hard to prove to yourself that you can do it. And that beyond the desire to win a race is what continues to drive me to ride a bike, I think. In fact, I know that's what it is. And to be a part of that for myself, of course, feels very good, but then also to have watched over time as I feel like I've hopefully brought that out in people means a lot to me. And that's the kind of community that I want to continue to build. And to feel like I have started that here, first makes me want to come back here to echo that answer to your previous question. Like, there's still something here, and it's moving in the right direction. Not just for me, but I think for everybody in this community that I'm trying to build. And at the core for me as an individual thinking about riding a bike, it is it boils down to the passion for being outside, doing something challenging, to push yourself to your mental and physical limit to see how far you can go. And if you can go that far in riding a bike, who's to say that you can't apply those same skills to something else in your life to take on that challenge? Yeah, and I think for me, I found what that driving passion is, and the foundation of all of it. But that's something that I hope to share with others here through this little project as well.
Hobie?
Hobie's hard.
He loves barking.
Yeah, he loves barking. a lot.
We haven't had a barking dog at my parents' house since 2011. And boy, is it fabulous. Huskies don't bark.
I did not know that about huskies.
All they do is, I mean, they bark sometimes, but they only make noise when they're like messing around.
Do they howl?
Yeah, you can like make. Our old dog we used to get him to like howl.
Wow.
But my parents' current dog just like kind of sings.
What's her name?
Lucci.
Lucci.
You should meet her sometime. She's cool.
I haven't met Lucci yet.
She's chill.
Yeah.
She's chill, bro.
What was your previous dog's name?
Blaney.
That's
you did that beautiful art.
Yeah. Blaney.
What time is it?
6:40.
I feel like this could go on for 17 hours. So
yeah. This is interesting. This is a fun. I've never done this. You know.
That's kind of cool, huh?
Yeah, and I'm thinking you've now done this a lot. That's so interesting.
Yeah, but mostly talking about distracted driving,
right?
Which I guess we could talk about also, but in the interest of time, what were we just talking about? Community.
Why bikes?
Why bikes?
What was it? Something about community and wanting to build something here on Maui. I was talking about for a while.
Right. Yeah. So I guess my follow-up question to what you were saying is, now that you've been on Maui for over a year, community, you have a big bike ride coming up on Sunday. As we're talking, it's on the upcoming Sunday.
Oh, yep.
What is it? Why is it what it is? And how will it be done?
Why is it the way it is?
Then why didn't it happen on Sunday when
Yes,
as
yeah.
well.
Ben was going to come out. Well, he did come out here, and then we unfortunately had to postpone this big ride for forecasted weather, which unfortunately turned out to be entirely untrue. And
it was the nicest day that I was here.
The nicest day of the week. Yeah, that was brutal. But we got to do other fun stuff, so that was also cool.
Right.
Including kayaking with whales, which was also
we could talk about that.
Oof, yeah, that's a separate one.
So what's the big ride?
What's the big ride? It is a 192-mile ride around the entire island of Maui and spiraling up to finish at the summit of Haleakala at 10,000 feet, which essentially means it's the entire perimeter. You can think about it as one road, which is an interesting way to think about it. Huh. And I just keep following it right, and then at opportunities for right turns, the last one coming around, you just kind of go up to the summit.
And then you're done.
Yeah, which is 192 miles later, and almost, I think it'll be just under 23,000 vertical feet. Over half of that gained elevation is in the last third of the ride.
You'll be tired.
I will be tired. It would be hot.
I would be dead.
Hot. It would be sunny and hot at that point, which would be less fun than probably every other part of it. But that's how these rides go.
So 192 miles, I bet most people on Earth have not ever considered doing that sort of mileage. I've never biked that much.
Yet.
You've done some crazy rides. How does this one, in your thinking, compare to other rides that you've done of this caliber?
It will be hard. It will be very hard. That I'm very sure of. But it will also, I guess to answer the other, two other long rides I've done, ultra long rides, both just over 300 miles. One was 2 years ago, which was more or less flat, paved.
Where?
From Boston to Rome, New York, with our friends Frank McCarthy. Frank, I guess, our only friend who rode it. And then there was one of Frank's friends I rode with for a while also. 300 miles, maybe 13,000 feet or so of elevation gained over 306. So less climbing, more miles.
And how long did that take?
That took 25 total hours, I want to say. Or maybe it was 24 total hours, 21 moving hours. something like that. And it rained for 21 of those total hours.
Oh my gosh.
That is like a steady rain. So that was hard. That was mentally very hard, especially toward the end there, when it got dark for the second time. Ride through the night, ride through the day. It gets dark again. It's raining. You're 300 miles in, and you're like, oh, okay, this is horrible. So I know mentally I can get to pretty dark places, like challenging places, and push through those things, which gives me confidence going into this one. And then a year ago, a 306 probably again, mile ride through Vermont, 34,000 vertical
Not just
feet.
through Vermont, the entire length of Vermont.
The entire diagonal length of Vermont, yeah. That a couple others have done before who inspired me to try and do something like this. One of them being Ted King, who did it 2 years prior to when I gave it a valiant effort. That was 27 hours, 24 moving hours, if I'm remembering those numbers correctly, I think. That's all dirt roads.
And a lot more climbing.
And a lot more climbing.
What was the total elevation gain-ish?
34,000.
34. So this ride that you're looking at is 110-ish miles less. But
Than both of those rides.
okay, so this ride is a fair bit shorter mileage-wise, but right in the middle in terms of elevation of those two.
But right in the middle, that's exactly correct. Yeah.
So you've done in the past both this mileage and this amount of climbing. So how does
Correct.
How are you preparing for it, I guess?
Just as seriously from estimating times to different places, breaking it down to 6 different checkpoints where I'll have people to help me refuel and stuff. That's all the same, but that now feels way more familiar, and takes less mental effort. Still a great deal of it, but less so, which has allowed me then to focus on other aspects of the ride. And so in this instance, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity. I now know I can do something like this physically, which doesn't make it any easier, or less fun. Actually, I still love the challenge of that. That stays the same. And then it's like, how do I bring more people into this experience to get kind of hopefully get a taste of what it feels like to really push yourself physically, in a positive way, I think, and then also to bring some element of community. Not just bringing people into the experience, but then also everyone's providing for a good cause, fundraising for a good cause. That is the Amua Family Services team, as I previously described. Yeah. So more bandwidth goes to something like that versus the logistics of the ride itself. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So you reached back out to the Amua family, and you've been fundraising and have done very well with that effort in the last...
Man, better than I thought.
It's only been, 4 weeks? Or not even?
It was 4 weeks to what was scheduled the day, 19th. Right. So it will be 5 weeks when it's all said and done. Yeah, which is wild. Yeah, started with a goal of $2,500. And I've, again, never done any sort of fundraising like this before, so I didn't know what to expect. I've watched you do it, but, I mean, that's also, they're different things, and, I can't really remember how it started off for you, to be honest, because it's a long time ago now. Right. So I was like, well, here, it seems like a good goal for, a 4-week project versus yours, which was a multi-month
It's still
year.
going.
It's still going project. Yeah, you're right.
Might be a lifelong.
Yeah, so different scales.
Right.
So how do I base off that? I don't know, $2,500. We got a month, and then we hit that in 2 weeks, which felt amazing. And then it was all right, well, I got at that point another 2 weeks. I'll throw another 1,000 on there. Maybe we can get another 1,000 in 2 weeks, and then we hit that in 3 days after that. And it was like, oh wow, here we are at 3,500, and there's still 10 days left. Let's go to 4,000, and then we hit that one again, and that was right on the cusp of postponing everything. And so now we're looking for 4,750, and we're at 4,350, or maybe a couple bucks below that right now, which has been awesome to see. Yeah, a lot of support and encouragement, more than I thought. Yeah, I had, again, no expectations going in, and was very nervous, honestly, of how this would be received, and it's all been positive, which has been great for everybody involved, I think. You know?
Yeah. I think you've seen this, and this was certainly my experience, but when people get excited about people doing adventures and cool athletic feats, but it's a totally different level and quality, I think, of excitement when there's something deeper than just doing it for the glory of. Because I mean, you've said that only a couple people have ever done, or maybe only one person has done this exact or as close to this exact.
As
route.
far as I know, I don't think anyone's done. Nobody has suggested that anyone's done this route in this order. The West Maui, East Maui, Haleakala in this order. But I know it has been done at least a couple of times, all three in one day. Yeah.
So very few people have done it all in any sort of combination, but you're doing it for something that you care about and for an organization that you care about and their mission, and are giving back to them, and you've seen the positive response from them by they're obviously excited to have some funds. You're a great person. They're providing aid stations, and it should be great.
Yeah, and that was another big element, actually, to get back to the planning of this one, was that the team over at Amuba Family Services, when I reached out with this idea, they responded to say absolutely yes, and which was incredible. Can you tell us what we need to do to support you on the day of the ride logistically, and we will do it. And it was like, oh wow, there goes all like the trying to like talk to friends and family or whoever to help take time out of their day to go do this thing for me. And they stepped into that role, which alleviated a lot of the mental burden of organizing that sometimes most challenging element of recruiting people as support, and allowed me to help do way more fundraising stuff.
So it's a win. It's a win-win because people want to be involved, and this is a great way for them to do it. And you'll hopefully have a couple people join for part of it too, right?
Yeah. That's the last element of this is, as I have said directly, trying to bring cycling more into a central community on the island. And I thought one way to do that could be to invite people to be a part of this ride physically, to come out and ride for as much or as little as they want. I have said I have to maintain more or less a steady pace to be able to do this thing, but that does not mean that I won't be excited to see you, and be excited for you to be out there riding a bike first and foremost, and then just to be a part of this kind of grander thing. And so we'll see. Hopefully people, I know in talking to those in the cycling community here that a few are trying to figure out where I'm going to be and how they're going to be able to track me so they can try and link up for a little bit. There's a guy flying from Oahu to come over here, who I've told you about.
Just a couple islands over.
Just a couple island over. Well, one island over. Yeah, the over Honolulu. But he, has been also helping promote this ride from his end, which has been very nice. And then was like, hey, I'm going to book a flight and join you for, I think, most of it, actually, which is going to be wild.
Well, that'll be awesome, and I'm excited to see you to complete it, and B, to see what this leads to, because I think it's a unique thing for this community, I think, and I think people are fired up about like a seed being planted in this world that's kind of untapped.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. Especially as I do some work with Maui Sunriders here and watching that cycling shop, which is a different topic of discussion, but as they've been new and growing and trying to bring people in, and then I can be kind of a representative of that, I think, not just for Sunrise, but for cycling generally. Like, there are two things happening. It's like, can we build something together here that everyone will like as best we can? It's like, here's an opportunity, and we'll just give it our best shot. That's
all you can do.
That's all you can do. Yeah, go ride your bike all day. That's what ultimately what I get to do. So that's the selfish element of that.
Literally the whole day. You're leaving at 1 a.m.?
I leave at 1 a.m. Yeah, to finish by sunset.
So that'll be cool to hear about. I'm excited to talk to you afterwards to debrief remotely.
Yep.
And so before you head into it, what are some things that you're What are you excited about, and is there anything that you're nervous about or kind of putting more energy into planning for?
Um, I am most excited because I have thought about what I anticipate the highs and lows to be, which does not always reflect what the actual highs and lows will be, as you know from doing anything really, especially outside. Um, I'm excited to starting, honestly, and riding through the dark on what should be very quiet roads, on what I hope and imagine will be a clear sky to see stars. Um, that will be very cool. Um, I'm then excited for the interestingly, like the last maybe 10 miles or so to the summit, because at that point, assuming everything goes in the way that I hope it goes, the entire Amua Family Services team will be up there. I'll have some friends who are going to be up there, and hopefully there's a couple of cyclists also who I've been working with to get up toward the last few miles. I think that's also very weather dependent also, because it could be pretty gnarly up there, and if that's the case, I don't blame anyone for not coming out. But that piece of it will I think hopefully should feel very good, and just summiting would I keep saying because I'm hoping will feel really good. What I'm least excited for is like the really the beginning of the 10,000 foot climb. I'm not sure where I'm going to be mentally. I have a pretty good sense of where I'll be physically, but mentally, I'm not sure where I'll be exactly at that point. That's harder to predict, I think. And it'll be in the heat of the day, and there's no shade back there. Yeah, so that'll be hard, I think. I know.
Well, the good news is you'll only be 36 miles from 3 6 packs of delicious, cold, athletic, non-alcoholic beer,
Yeah,
of which, or
gosh darn
for
right.
which, we are both ambassadors. So nice of them
Indeed.
to hook you up with some
Yes.
supportive product.
Yes. Yeah, they were very kind, and we reached out with an idea uh, to do something cool and kind of extend the offer for them to send some beer and get some cool, delicious, non-alcoholic brews into people's hands, and they said, "Yeah." So we'll have some of those ice cold on the summit.
I
Hot
think
dog.
I think people will definitely turn out for that, if nothing else. Obviously to
I hope
celebrate you,
so. Yeah,
but that's
and
it.
I think again, hoping for crystal clear skies with a beautiful sunset going down, and all of us enjoying an athletic brew.
Be a great photo opportunity.
Ah, tell me about it. Looking down on the whole island that I just rode all the way around. That'd be
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah, that's gonna be a cool feeling, regardless of whether you can actually see it or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Well, we gotta go eat some pizza, but
Yep.
excited to debrief this when you're done, and good luck. I know you'll crush it.
Thanks, Ben.
Yep.
This is fun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you had
Double
me
entendre.
here, and now you're here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ben,
Yep.
into your little space over here and onto this podcast.
Yep.
All right. See ya.
Later. Hey, it's Ben just peeking in here in the middle of the conversation. Just wanted to have a little bit of a segue from the conversation I had with Conor before his ride and after his ride. So this is it. You just heard the conversation I had with him in person in Maui. And then what you'll listen to shortly after this is our conversation that we had over Zoom. Conor was in Maui and I was in San Diego, a few thousand miles away, but felt pretty close. So enjoy this, and then we will talk again at the end. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.
Okay, Ben.
All
you said.
right, Conor.
Okay, Ben.
Did you listen to that? Did you listen to the first half that I sent or no?
I have not. I have not listened. I did watch the whale
makes sense.
video, which was incredible. I've actually watched that a few times
Wasn't that trippy?
because that was unbelievable. I couldn't believe how crystal clear the songs were. Way more than I thought they were going to be.
It blew the first time I saw it, I was like, I thought my camera was broken or something.
Because it was so beautiful. It it made me think immediately of Harry Potter. You know, when he puts the egg thing under the water, and then all of a sudden he can hear it.
Yeah. Wait. Wow.
The Goblet of
What is that?
Fire. I think that's
Wow.
that one. I can't really remember,
That
but
sounds
that's what I
right.
thought of immediately. Was like, oh my gosh, this is magic. This is magic.
So here we are, Connor. It's Sunday, March 5th. 1 week ago. So we spoke about a week and almost 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Wow, that's right. Because it was right before the day. There was, wasn't it? Yeah, the day
It was
before it was supposed to
Tuesday.
happen. Oh yeah, maybe a couple days after. The days leading up. That feels
Right.
like forever ago.
I know. Well, a lot's happened to both of us since then.
Time flies when you're having fun, right,
It
Ben?
really, well, yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, and when you have two queen beds and nothing else in a hotel room.
Living the
Um.
dream, baby. Mm-hmm.
So Connor, here we are. We're no longer together in Maui. I'm in San Diego. You're still in Maui. The main thing that's happened between our two conversations is that you went on a big bike ride last Sunday.
I went on a big bike ride, the whole of Maui, and then up to the tip top of Haleakala at 10,000 feet. Yep. Um, yeah. I'm not surprised that I still feel pretty worn down, but a little bit. And I feel a little bit shell shocked, I think is how I'd describe it, in a good way. But it was one of those things where you look forward to it for so long, you put so much time and energy into something with anything, not just a bike ride, but when you have something on the calendar and you just like work toward it forever, and then you do the thing and then it's over, and then you're just kind of like, oh, now what? You know? It's
Yep.
like, not that I'm feeling a loss of purpose, but like I had a very defined purpose for like 5 straight weeks. And actually it feels very nice to not have anything immediately on the calendar in the cycling realm for a little bit. Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel super fired up that I did it, and then also equally fired up that it's now done. You know what I mean? Yeah, big one. Big one.
A big one indeed. So I was back in Connecticut when you did this, and you had your live tracker going online for people to follow along. You started at about 6:30 Eastern time, or
Mm-hmm.
6 Eastern
Must have
time.
been 6 because it was 1 a.m. 1 a.m. here on Maui.
I was
Yep.
sleeping. I woke up
Mm-hmm.
at 8:30 or something, and you were approaching Lahaina. I don't think you had made it. Maybe you had made it to Lahaina already. I'm not sure. Or no, you had made it past there. I think you were in Napili area, like kind of on the like halfway around
Mm-hmm.
West Maui.
That sounds about right. Two and
And
a half
then
hours in.
throughout the whole day until what 10 p.m. ish, 9:30 p.m. ish Eastern, you were just
Yeah.
working your way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Just cruising, baby.
Kind of wild to be going about my day and periodically checking. Oh, the dots further along.
It was very, very fun to watch after everything, to watch all the social media stuff that people had put up, including all of your videos of the live feed, which was video that you were sharing from last winter when we were here together, which I got a kick out of.
Well,
But
it's kind of cool. I didn't realize that.
it was smart. It was fun. It was a fun way to share, yeah, some of the reality of what I was going through, but with video that was a year old.
Well, for the people who didn't get a chance to see this cinematic masterpiece, this was Connor was at the last 25% of going up Haleakala to finish his ride, and I was going through my GoPro archive from when we rode it last year and could figure out roughly, because I remembered the sections like of the switchbacks, and
Yep.
conveniently had content from basically the exact places that you were at that time, and I put it up
Yeah.
on Instagram as if it was live, and a couple of people were like, "Is this actually live? How are you doing this?"
Oh gosh, I love when you shared. If you were wondering what the visitor center looks like, I can't show you that, but I can show you the ticket booth where you go through beforehand.
Did you have to pay? Like, how did that work when you were going up there?
I did not know. I was a little bit there was a whole line of cars as I approached, which was a bummer because I did not want to have to stop and wait in a line. And fortunately, I was with two other guys riding at the time who joined me, Pete and Jake, and they cruised a little bit ahead of me and very kindly, even though I had a pass, one of them just paid for me to go through. And as I rolled up behind the last car, there must have been 6 or 7 in line. The ticket woman actually leaned out the window and said, "You're good to go. Just cruise by." And I said, "Oh,
Wow.
thank sweet Jesus." And then I just kept going because I didn't want to just stand there for like 15 minutes and have to wait. So my
Was
buddies helped
that
me out.
you had a checkpoint just past that though, right? Or
I had a checkpoint just past that at the visitor center. So that was another like half mile up or so. Yep.
and
Yep.
then you stopped for a brief. Well, why don't you can you walk us through what the day was like? Is that even possible?
I will walk you. I'll do my darndest. Yeah, it was um the one thing that I feel like I did a very good job of thinking all the details through, with the exception of two things. One was for all the bike nerds out there, I did not replace the batteries in my power meter. So literally 15 minutes into the ride, I got a low battery reading on my power meter, and I chuckled to myself and thought, whoops. So that was one thing. The other thing I didn't totally think through was the logistics of going to bed and then waking up and getting to the start point at La Perouse for a 1 a.m. start. Because what that actually meant in reality was it's about a half-hour drive from Kihei to get there. So I don't know why I just never really thought about it, but it meant waking up at 11:45 p.m. So I went to bed at like 8:30 or so. I tried to take a nap Saturday afternoon. I'm not the best napper. But yeah, so it was like 2 hours of sleep. And then because I hadn't thought that all the way through, I was like, we had all kinds of breakfast and stuff. I was with my sister Kerrigan and Jacob, her boyfriend, and we had all this plans of breakfast and things. And we woke up at 11:45, and we're like, "Is anybody actually hungry?" And we're all like, "No, we just had dinner 2 hours ago." So that was an interesting one. I did force down a bagel and peanut butter on our drive just to get something in there because I didn't want to start totally without anything. But anyway, made it to La Perouse for a 1 a.m. start. It was crystal clear. The stars were unbelievable, and there was no wind, which was excellent.
Really?
Yeah, that was awesome. And then what was also awesome was standing there, and from La Perouse, you can look up the volcano Haleakala and see. You can't see the road, but you can see more or less where the highway is, like 3,000 vertical feet above you up there. And it was kind of surreal to look up there and be like, well, if all goes well, then in about 12 hours, I should be passing right through there, looking down on this point. And I was like, wow, what am I going to feel like in 12 hours? I have no idea. But it
When
was a
you say
lot
the
of.
highway, you mean like Hana Highway, like what you'd be going around?
It is at that point it's the Pi'ilani Highway by definition, but yes, it's the one that goes all the way around. Yeah, so like up by Maui Wine and everything is right there. Um, and I'll tell you, it felt very good to just start, to like take the first couple pedal strokes, and then there's a lot of, I think before any big ride, there's a lot of anxiety that builds up for me of just like it's you do all the prep work and it's like, all right, let's just start. And then I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about it. But then the first time, once you actually pedal, it just becomes a bike ride. And then it's like, oh, I'm just riding my bike. I'm just not going to stop for a super duper long time this time. But like the mechanics are all the same. It's just pedaling. And I love pedaling. So that felt really good to get going. Very still, very quiet for the first hour or so through Kihei, going west. And then as I rounded you kind of like round this bend to start going out farther west toward Lahaina and Kanapali and Napili and out toward the westernmost point of the island. And right there, I will say, was Maui's a windy place, but that was the single windiest experience that I've had on this island. There was a crosswind that was ripping through to the point where I had to unclip a couple of times because I was getting blown over and I was worried that I was gonna have to put a foot down. And that was at 2:30 in the morning, which was crazy.
So
which
the
made me
wind was
pretty
coming
nervous.
from the west?
It was coming from the east. It was the east trade winds that ripped through, but I was kind of moving at a like is it North Key Road or South Key Road? North Key Road. But that puts you at a perpendicular to the wind as you're making your way over toward Ma'alaya. So the wind was coming at me directly from the side. And it was totally nuts. Yeah, and that made me a little bit nervous because I was like, if it's this windy at 2:30 a.m. and it was supposed to be windy that day, I was like, what's the rest of this day gonna look like? Yeah, so that was something. Also had Jacob and my sister driving behind me, which was wonderful and good
all
peace
the
of
way
mind.
out there.
Yeah, they were gonna go just to the what I call the beginning of Adventure Time, like when the road going west tapers off into single lane, and then you like wind your way through the canyons of the West Maui Loop. But we got all the way out there, and and they were like, "Well, we're already here, so we might as well just keep coming." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So they ended up doing the first like 4 hours with me, 60-ish miles before they peeled off at about 4. Oh no, approaching 5 a.m. I guess, and then they went home and went to sleep for, I presume, a very long time. And I kept going.
This was your sister's birthday, right?
Oh yeah, this was my sister's birthday. So I gave
What a
her a birthday
treat.
card and a little gift at about midnight before we hopped in the car. And she spent the first 4.5 hours of her birthday probably mostly sleeping in the car as Jacob drove. But she was very kind. I gave her my Instagram login information, and so she was through the day, which was very nice. She was just reposting all the things that anyone tagged me in, so I didn't have to look at my phone at all, which was excellent because that was the primary way that I think people were following along and wanted to stay engaged with everything. And I knew that that was going to be a tall order to ride and stay up to date with all that stuff. But so she very kindly did all that for me, which was very nice.
Yeah, it's a huge mental load off your back because
Oh,
knowing
big
that
time.
you've been so diligent about posting about it beforehand, so you can't just stop so you can focus on the ride because everyone's watching or wanting to watch.
Yeah. And that was part of what one of the goals of this ride was to like bring people into this experience as best I could. And that's for better or worse, that's a critical piece of it. That's the beauty side of social media is that you can bring people into those kind of things. So she was very kind to take the reins.
Mm-hmm. So when did the sun rise?
The sun rose at 6:40, maybe somewhere in there. So fortunately had great lights. Thank you, Ben. I still need to send those to you.
I don't need them. I'm in a hotel room.
Those are great. So I made my way to my first aid stop at Baldwin Beach Park, where I met a lot of the MUA Family Services team, which was awesome to see them. I thought it was just going to be Marnie, but it was in fact Marnie and Katie and Dean as well. There were 3 there at 5:45. Dean had his dog, which was awesome and fun. And then also there was a guy, Jude, who he's another cyclist here on the island, who very kindly, I don't know if I told you this, Ben, but he woke up, it must have been like 3:45. He lives in Kihei. He woke up that early and then was tracking me and just crossed the island like through the middle to try and meet me at Baldwin. He wanted to ride into Baldwin with me, but I was a little bit ahead. But as I rolled up to stop, I was there for about a minute, and I turned around and there's another cyclist, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And it was this guy Jude, which was and he was so awesome. He was just like, "I know your pace is going to be faster than mine, even like 10 hours in, but I just wanted to come and say hello. And this was the best opportunity to do it. I was like, dude, you're the
Wow.
man. I know. It was
That's
very
so
nice
cool.
of him. So met those guys 5:45. I also realized one of the interesting things of getting up at 11:45 for a 1 a.m. start is that um, throws your body clock is all off. So I didn't get a poop in before the ride start, which is critical on any long ride. So that didn't happen, but then made my way. I live, as you know, right near Baldwin, so I actually deviated from the route for a hot second to poop at my house, which was an awesome little break.
That must have been kind of trippy to go back to your house at
It
whatever
it
hour.
was a little trippy, yeah, and yeah, it was very, I was very, yeah, it was awesome to be able to poop at home, I will say, and a little silly, and I will say because I deviated from the route, as I was leaving, my mom called immediately, and she was like, "Is everything okay? What's going on? You're off, you're off the route."
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So she was also paying close attention, which was very nice. Yeah, and then kept cruising toward Hana. And the goal was to be at that point. The goal was to be riding past Paia toward Hana and be like on the road to Hana by 6. Um, and I hit that. It was just a couple minutes before 6 that I was leaving this house to keep riding, and I thought, nice. I was still feeling very good. I thought we're off to an excellent start. And then we kept going. Just
How was the wind on
uh,
that side? Because I was thinking that that was going to
uh,
be probably the worst section for wind.
That is, I was worried about that, especially given the Ma'alaya situation that I described, because I was really hoping part of the planning of this was to be able to go through all of like the Baldwin Beach area and Paia before the wind picked up. And the past few nights before that, it was very windy all through the night. And if there's a wind, it's a headwind ripping through there, and that would really have slowed me down. But in some dramatically beautiful situation, there was no wind as I did that, so it like was
Unbelievable.
ripping through the middle of the night, and then early morning it totally tapered off into nothing. So I cruised all through that with no issues, which was awesome.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that was very good for mental the mental game. That felt like a win, and you take every win you can get in those
Well, and for your
16-hour
time
efforts.
too, it probably made a big difference.
And for that, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was fun to have planned all the different times that I thought I'd be at checkpoints, and then be either exactly on or a few minutes ahead at each one. And the farther I got, the more a little bit ahead I was at each one, which was also, yeah, that felt really good from a planning perspective to be able to have nailed all of that, which is a testament to fueling correctly also. Because that's something that I'm definitely working on these ultra long adventures, is to fuel early and often. Um, yeah, so that was good. Um,
So
so where
your first checkpoint where you got new water and stuff, whatever it was
Yep,
in at Baldwin Beach Park.
yep.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, had all I in the days leading up had dropped off like go bags at all of the different checkpoints with the um different Amua Family Services staff would be at each of those places. So they each had a bag with all the things that I would need. So that made it very easy because I would just roll up and like all the stuff was right there. Um, and yeah, and also just good to see people, you know. Um, Other fun fact of this ride was that I was only entirely alone for like 10 miles, because I had my sister and Jacob for the whole beginning, and then rode solo for 10 or so miles to get to Baldwin. And then I guess from Baldwin on to Haiku, which was only another like 6 or 7 miles, that was alone. But then I met a guy named Josh. Josh had flown in from Oahu the previous night. He had very kindly through this whole process been one of the guys who was just like reposting all the stuff that I was blasting out into the world, and was super jazzed up about this whole the ride. And then also he had done Pedal Amua, which is a fundraiser ride for Amua Family Services, so he knew them. So he was all in on it, which was great. He flew in, landed at 6, p.m. Saturday, and then by 6 a.m. the next morning, he was riding with me from Haiku. And he
Wow.
became my riding buddy for just about 100 miles around all of East Maui. So I had a riding buddy all the way through that, which was awesome. Honestly, it was better. It's always a little interesting because I don't know him. So just like having somebody show up and like all of a sudden you're really just out there together. I don't know his riding style. He doesn't know mine. I don't know his personality. He doesn't know mine. So I was a little bit apprehensive. But then he was so totally awesome. It made it so easy. And then within a few minutes, it was like, all right, we're gonna have fun together. And it's also a nice way to just mentally not be exclusively thinking about your own issues, mostly being like leg pain and fatigue as that all begins to set in.
Right, when
X
there's
many
someone
miles
else
in.
to share it, like someone else is sharing it in some capacity, and
Yeah.
that you're focused less
That
on
piece of it,
yourself.
and then also like sharing the beauty of the place, because it was his first time doing East Maui Loop, which was a lot of fun. He had driven out to Hana with his family and back before, but he had not ever ridden the whole thing. So it was really fun to be able to, because I know it pretty darn well, so to be able to, yeah, like get him hyped about things that were upcoming, and like when the sun started to rise, and we were so quiet out there because it was Sunday morning, and just watching like the rays of sun start to hit like the misty jungle, that is that side of the road to Hana. The colors were incredible, and it's also cool doing that by yourself, but like way cooler doing it with somebody there to like oogle at everything. Um, yeah, and just have a buddy through the whole kit and caboodle.
Do you guys
So yeah.
get rained on there in that section?
Nah, yes, in short, but it was only for literally for about a minute. And it was, I kid you not, about 10 seconds after I said to him, if we don't get rained on, this is gonna be the best day ever. And 10 seconds later it started to rain on us.
No
But
way.
it was very short lived. And so that was totally fine. Yep. We also had which I thought I had taken a video of, but it wasn't recording. I was just holding my phone up for no reason. We had 2 cows out on the road, which was an interesting surprise, way past any of the ranch areas. So they were just way farther out on this road than they should have been. I have no idea where they came from.
Wait, like where?
Oh gosh.
Wait, once you had gone through Hana, past Hana?
No, between on the road to Hana going out toward that direction. Maybe a third of the way in, but like along all the cliffs and stuff. So all the like places where they should be, we had passed by miles. So they were just way out there. And they saw us, and they naturally got a little bit nervous and took off like full sprint ahead of us. And so we were riding behind these 2 cows that were like taking all the hairpins and stuff with us for probably, I would say, at least a quarter of a mile, if not a little bit more, which was pretty surreal. No cars, very fortunately, because they did take a couple of those hairpin turns on the wrong side of the road. And me and Josh looked at each other and we were like, oh God, are we about to witness a catastrophe here? But no, they made it, and they jumped a guardrail and were sprinting along the cliff edge, which also made us nervous because we're about to watch one of these things just trip and fall, 500 feet down to the ocean.
Oh my
But they
gosh,
made
that's
it
an
as far
image.
as we know. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wild.
it's those kind of things that it was really fun to have somebody else there for, be able to
Right.
have shared that. Yeah.
I liked what you were just saying about you 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 were trying to record those cows, but you ended up
But I
not
blew
working
it.
out. And
Mhm.
yeah, whatever happened, and then your buddy Josh texted you saying that this one was just for us. And I think that's kind of cool because at least I frequently find that, or have the temptation to always try to get a video or capture a moment in some way so that I can remember it later on.
Yep.
But it's kind of cool when you actually don't and you're just really present in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's also riding with somebody, I felt less inclined to take photos and videos. Because when I'm out there riding by myself, and I do a heck of a lot of riding by myself, it's like I want to share that, and in those instances, the only way to do that is through photos and videos. But like having another person there was also kind of like, oh, I can kind of just focus on being here. Yeah, so that was it. It also helped alleviate some of the pressure that I was putting on myself to document this ride. Yeah, which was kind of an interesting thing to not have foreseen, but then have it just be that way was nice. And then it became, because also back there's like no service or anything, so what was I going to do with all that anyway at that point? Yeah, and it was just riding bikes, and it could not have been a more perfect ride. Truly, from there all the way around the backside of Hana, and then making your way up the volcano. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. But yeah, cruised all through front side of Hana. Met Raynell at Coconut Glens for a age stop number 2. She had a couple of coconuts that we drank. We drank the water. It was delicious. And hung out there for a little bit, and then kept cruising.
Who is this again? Raina?
Raynell, she is the point person for Dream Amua, which is the program that all the donated money is going to. That's the wish granting program for children on Maui who are facing challenging circumstances in their life. If that's familial issues, or if it's a health related thing, kids are referred to Dream Amua, and then Raynell works with the family or the kid or the guardian, whoever, to learn about the kid, what the situation is, what they want to do, what their dream is, and then hopefully make that dream come true. So it's under the umbrella of Amua Family Services, and Raynell is the point person for it, which I didn't know actually until after all of this. But anyways, she was the one at aid 2. And then, yeah, hung out there for maybe 10 or so minutes, maybe 15 minutes. She had a Theragun, which I took advantage of, which was great. And then, yeah.
Well, before you go into, and then at that point, so checkpoint 2, how many hours was this in the ride, and how, if you can recall, how was your body feeling at that point?
This was about 115 miles in, about 8,000 feet of climbing, and about just under 8 hours of total time at that point. And honestly, I was shocked at how good I still felt. I certainly felt like I'd been riding for a while, but I did not feel any more drained or fatigued than I do, or I'm used to feeling after rides of like 4 or 5 hours. Sometimes I felt the same. It felt like I had kind of plateaued, and like things hurt a little bit, but it was a normal amount of discomfort. It wasn't dramatic in any sense. And that, I think, is a testament to 2 things. One is disciplined training for a very long time now, but then I think more importantly is fueling, and just eating so much stuff, way more than is like actively is comfortable to eat, but knowing that I had to, or else I was gonna suffer on the 10,000 foot climb at the end. And that's really what I was trying to prevent and mitigate the pain that I knew was coming inevitably, by just eating all of the things. And it worked. I was feeling excellent as you can at that point in a ride, I think, which was good.
So eating an uncomfortable amount of stuff, just for people who have no idea what that looks like. What's an hour of food on this experience, roughly, if you could break it down?
I was shooting for about 85 grams of carbohydrates per hour for the whole day. Which, if I remember the math from all the spreadsheet stuff I did, it was something like minimum like 1,500 grams of carbs over the day. But in an hour, to like a full bottle, and in a full bottle, there's most of my bottles had 60 grams of carbs from a Flow Formulas hydration mix that I use. So a lot of it comes in liquid form, but then also in 1 hour it'd be like a full peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then maybe like a waffle, one of those like honey stinger waffles, and then like a gel or something. So it'd be like each of those three things plus the full bottle of liquid. Um, yeah.
Rinse and
So
repeat.
and then mixing, yeah, but being diligent about mixing and matching those things also, because if you do the same thing over and over and over again, you're gonna get tired of it. And the
Yeah,
second
over
you
the
start getting
course of
tired of it, yep.
a 18-hour day.
Yep. Yep. So a lot of bananas. I think I ate 6 bananas over the entire stretch, including one just before setting off. A lot of dried fruit, a lot of dried mangoes. Delicious they are. Um, um, a lot of chips for salt, because those go down pretty easy. Yeah. Oh, cookies. I baked a whole bunch of cookies the night before and put them in all the aid bags also. Didn't count those in the like nutrition plan, and just wanted them as little
Little
bonuses.
bonus.
Just a little sweet treat at each one, which was nice. Yeah, so just eating so much. It's as much an eating contest as it is a bike ride, for sure.
Did you do most of your eating while you were riding, or did you try to slam food while you were at the aid stations? Because I know the aid stations were less frequent than once an hour. So obviously a
Yep.
lot of it probably was on the bike.
A lot of it was on the bike. The vast majority was on the bike. There were a couple, like the cookies I would have at the aid stop. Um, but it was mostly as I planned it. It was like, at this aid stop, I should eat these two things, and then I should collect like this, and this, put those in my pockets, and then those are the things that I know that I must eat between this aid stop and the next aid stop. And so that made it mentally pretty straightforward. There wasn't much thinking that had to be done. It was all thought through already. So it's just like, whatever's in my pockets, I gotta eat it over these next 3 hours until I get to the next aid stop, and like drink these 3 bottles of water that I have fueled up here. Which was good. That was something that this is the first time that I planned a route or planned a ride that with that much foresight, to remove the like having to think about it in the moment situation, because you're just using so much energy. You want to focus all that energy into actually pedaling versus having to like think through a nutrition plan, for example. So my coach was remarkably helpful in planning all of that and helping me identify um, the different key things that I could plan ahead in order to not have to think about those while I was, 14 hours deep into a bike ride, because it's hard to think about much of anything at that point. You know?
Right. Well, and it's cool too that you had the ability to structure around the aid stations as well, and you didn't have to rely on carrying everything. And that, I don't know, just
Yes.
it provides a little bit of a framework.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the most critical aspects of support through this ride was that having people at these different places that I got to choose where they were along the route. And the Amua Family Services team was just like, you tell us where we need to be and when we need to be there, and give us the things that we need for you, and we'll be there. Which helped dramatically in the planning process of all of this. And then I kind of reaped the rewards of that on the day of, and it worked wonderfully. Yeah.
So you got your coconuts with with your
Yep.
buddy,
Yep.
and then
Me and Josh had coconuts, and then cruised on. Turned, hit the easternmost point, Hana, at just past 9, and then started making our way into the, I would say, more remote and then also drier stretch of the ride that is the backside of the road to Hana, on the dry side of the volcano, which is an
that's the stretch of the ride that I was most intimidated by as I thought through what the ride would look like. Because at that point, it's becoming an ultra long ride. That's as you round the turn there. We were at mile 135 or 140, and like 10 hours in maybe as we started to do that. And it's the dry side. It's you know it. It's wide open. There's no shade. It is very hot. And I would be hitting that point like as the sun is coming into the highest point in the sky. And it can also be shockingly windy over there because there's nothing to block it. It's just the trade wind just blasting through. And one thing that I was thinking about and hoping would be the case, and unfortunately was the case, is that on a typical day, riding in the direction I was riding, it would be a tailwind. And fortunately, it was exactly that. It was the most ripping tailwind that I have, to the point where, and maybe I said this to you at some point beforehand, but I have never been on a bike and been climbing a hill, and as you reach like the crest of the hill, the wind literally would just push me, and I could stop pedaling and just like cruise up the last few vertical feet of this climb and starting to like plateau or go down. And the wind did it, and it was like, oh boy, what a ride. Yeah, which was mentally huge, because then I knew that I'd be conserving a little bit more ahead of the climb. And so that all worked out perfectly. But that stretch also has a lot of the majority of the very punchy, steep climbs of the entire day. The most of the 10,000-foot climb, like the correct, all of that it's endless, but it's relatively gentle. Coming from sea level out of the backside of Hana is not those things. It is up, down, and all the ups are very steep. So I was not excited about that in the heat of the day. Wasn't, and thinking ahead of it, wasn't sure how I would be feeling. But fortunately, was still feeling pretty darn good. And then having the ripping tailwind at that point, and having a buddy Josh, who again it was his first time back there, so to be able to share that experience with him as we rounded. There's this one turn that you kind of go up, and you get a glimpse of what you're about to ride into, and you can just see this like perfectly paved ribbon road that goes along the side of the volcano. It's wide open and it's beautiful, and it seems to go on forever. But to have moments like that with someone who has never seen it before was special and a very nice surprise through this ride, which made all of it a little bit mentally easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you were describing the wind situation, I was picturing the complete inverse, which was my experience doing that.
That's right.
Where, I mean, I don't know what the wind was compared to what you had, but it was ripping. I would describe it that way as well. But in my face, because I went counterclockwise.
Yeah,
So you would
downhill.
crest a hill and then get pushed down into a rocket. I would crest a hill and then have to keep pedaling to go down.
Yeah, we had different experiences, I
Different
think.
experiences. But I'm so glad that you had that at the end of the ride, because this happened to me it was still the first half.
The very beginning.
Me.
Yeah.
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 Wow. And then you just kept going.
Next aid was at Bully's Burgers, which is through most of the backside of Hana. Then it's like it's a point where, having done the loop a couple of times, it then feels like you're like making your way back into certainly not the heart of the island, but kind of the place that I was describing earlier, where you can then look down to La Perouse and see like the black lava rock, which is the youngest land on Maui, and to be able to see, in my case, like where I came from 12 hours prior, and rolled into that aid stop maybe 20 minutes ahead of where I thought I was going to be, which felt very good. And so I took a little bit of a longer stop there, and had Josh obviously still with me, and then another guy, Pete, he was just on a ride
he had come all the way up from the middle of the island and rode out the backside to come meet us. And then, so there were 3 of us hanging there. Also had my buddy Johnny and his friend Holden, who were out on motorcycles zooming all around us. And Holden took a whole bunch of videos, which will be fun. And hopefully we'll put a little edit of some sort together in the coming weeks from what he was able to do. But that was also very nice just to have a mental shift, of now having these 2 guys zooming all around and like having fun trying to set up shots and stuff was a nice kind of break from just still pedaling, but mentally focus on something else, which was nice.
Right.
Although I will say this was also the beginning of when I fell off the fueling plan a little bit. Because I think of some of those distractions, which were certainly fun in the moment, but it also, I was focused on others and I was less focused on my needs, which in the moment felt fine, but it's you do something now and then you pay the price for that 4 hours later or 3 hours later. And I thinking back on it, that's when I started to, I felt better than I thought I would. So for some reason, I was like, oh, I can check out of the self-care stuff a little bit. Not consciously, but it just kind of happened that way, I think. And so took a bad poop at Bully's in a porta potty. And that was a moment where I was like, oh, this might get a little bit interesting for this last few thousand vertical feet I have to climb ahead of this. But yeah, so that was a thing that I also, thinking back on it, that was an interesting moment in the ride.
Were you feeling less good, or was that just a sign that
it was a sign that something was slightly amiss inside? I didn't feel any worse. I definitely, I felt a little bit more fatigued, but still not dramatically so. Still able to hold a pretty good pace, even going up some of the hills at that point, which was very encouraging, knowing what was ahead. But it was a sign of my gut saying, you're now, whatever it was, 10, 11 hours in. And yeah, maybe I just fell off a little bit of the fueling stuff. It's also, I've done a few very long rides, but few that are that 10 plus hours. And so I think my gut is also still learning how to digest things that deep into an effort. Yeah, so
it's
I think
not
that's
a natural process.
It's not, no, and there's no way around kind of the trial and error piece of it. And how many times can you try riding 10 plus hours and fueling effectively? Like, not that often, So it's yeah, part of me in my head beforehand knew that this was coming at some point, and was just happy that it happened later in the ride than I thought it was going to. But thinking backing on it, I think again part of it was my own deviation from the plan that I had set out because I was becoming distracted. And also, interestingly, what I hadn't thought about, when you look at the mileage at that point, like at that point I was 160 miles in. So mentally, knowing it was a 190-mile ride, it's like, I'm almost done. But I wasn't, And that was a really interesting mental game to play, because for the first 10 hours, I'm not really cruising, but I'm moving pretty good. And then all of a sudden the gradient increases and I slow down. And for the whole first 10 hours, I'm making such good progress, looking at the mileage, getting closer to the 190 goal. And then I see, 150, 160. It's like, I'm getting closer. And I know there's at that point, like 8,000 vertical feet up, just relentless uphill that still needs to happen. But I was starting to get to the point mentally that was like, I'm almost there, which in my experience on any ride, once I get to that point of I'm almost there, I start to lose track of the food and water stuff a little bit, because it's like, oh, I can make this last push. But in this instance, the last push is 8,000 feet up. So that was a whoopsie a little bit.
But it's such a natural thing to happen, I feel like, because you're you're 160 miles into this thing. You have such a small percentage of the distance left.
Yeah, exactly. It feels so
But
small.
it's the hardest
That's
part.
the hardest bit. Yeah, it's the hardest bit. And that, I mean, yeah, that was another 4 to 5 hours of pedaling that I still had to go. And like that's on any that's a long ride in and of itself.
Yeah, most
You
people
know?
haven't ridden that much ever. And that's the last
Yeah, and that was the last chunk.
20%.
Yep.
Oh. So you hit Bullies, you had a bad poop, you were 160 miles in,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then it was that when it was pretty much just all uphill from there, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, it's kind of still rolling. Rollers up and down, a little bit of flat, but a net uphill. As I continued to like round the volcano and make my way back to the what I kind of call the center of it, where Kula is, the township. And then there's a kind of a flat stretch before you take a right hand turn to start going up. It's like a 2 mile up, and then what I was looking forward to is it's like a mile or so of just straight downhill. And that's at the bottom of that, well, not the bottom of that, but a mile into that descent, you then hit Crater Road, and that is the turn to the national park. And that sign says Haleakala National Park, 22 miles, no food, no gas. That's the sign that everybody knows. And so at that point, what was awesome and a wonderful surprise was seeing my good friend Ollie from Ollie Pizza, one of my very good buddies. He was there in his purple flip flops and little e-bike and t-shirt and shorts, which was a hoot to see. And then this other guy, Jake, who I did not know, but now know. Those guys were hanging there and waiting for us to arrive. They were following us, on the tracker thing. And at that point, we said goodbye to Josh. He cruised back down to Haiku. So he finished his loop. And then, so at that point, it was me and Ollie on his little e-bike, and Jake, and then Pete was still with us. And the four of us took the right-hand turn and started to go up. And I was...
So Josh is the guy from Oahu, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so he didn't go. I thought he went all the way up to the top with you, and he didn't though.
He did not. No, he just did East Maui. I didn't really know how long he was going to be joining for when he showed up, and we, in the first little while we were talking about it, and he has his own training plan that he's doing for his own, like bike season. And it made sense. East Maui is a huge ride in and of itself. For him, it was a 110 mile and 11,000 foot day, I think, when it was all said and done.
Big day.
Yeah, and to add the volcano makes that an enormous ride. And he was like, "That's I don't have that in me today." And I said, "Yeah, that seems totally fair." So yep, say goodbye to him. The four of us started to cruise up, and that was I was really not looking. My legs really were starting to hurt at this point, pretty good, and I was not to the point of like collapse, but to the point of like, this is really going to suck for the next 4 hours or so going up this thing big time. And if they hurt now, what on earth are they going to feel like, 4 hours in? Because there's no opportunity to recover. There's no descending to be done anymore, or even flats to be done. It's like either you're pedaling and you're making progress, or you're stopped. Those are your only two options. So yeah, that was wasn't looking forward to it, but once the four of us were cruising together, and I was kind of hanging in the back with Ollie, who I know the best of those four guys or those three other guys at that point. We were just like laughing at the fact that this was happening, and we were just we talked about this for a while leading up, and I didn't know he was going to be out there, so it was a fun surprise to see him and his wife Naomi, another friend of mine from I sling pizzas with him. She was in the car slinging pizzas. That's what we do. We sling pies.
You make pizzas.
Yeah, we make pizzas.
The locals call it slinging.
We're slinging. We're slingers, pizza slingers. But she was there in the car, taking photos and videos and stuff for fun. And even though Ollie only rode one single mile, and then turned around because they had to go actually make pizzas because that's what they do on Sunday afternoons. It was it was like a kind of a mental reset to like hang out for a little bit, and made that at least that first mile go by very easily, from a mental standpoint anyway. Yeah, and then kept on going. Um, and honestly, that next stretch, like until the visitor center, is kind of a blur. It was more like just put your head down and follow the wheel ahead of you,
It's a
which for
grind.
me was Jake, yeah, and Pete. Um, it was really nice to have them like essentially pacing me, because by that time I've been riding with Pete for a while, so he knew the pace that I was holding. So he still had his little power meter, so he would just like keep it at a number, and I would just follow him, which made it a little bit easier. Yeah, it would have been a slog alone, I think, big time. Yeah, really nice to have those guys. Yeah, but this is the first time that I've kind of thought about that stretch, and I honestly I don't really remember much, Ben.
Well, it's like you said before, it's pretty much the same thing for a long time. Obviously,
Yeah,
the topography doesn't change, but the geography changes. You're higher up, but it's
yeah.
you're just going up.
You're just going up. Yep. And it's just like, all right, there's the next hairpin. Got to make it to that hairpin. And then you make it. And then you see the next one. It's like, just got to make that one. And then just got to make that one. And then just got to make that one. And that just goes on for a long time. Um, and,
And you
and,
had
and
done this before too, so it wasn't like or this road a bunch of times, so it wasn't like you were taking in new experiences.
no, yeah. And at this point, I was doing far less looking around at everything. And it was more just, okay, I'm ready to finish this thing and be done. Um, yeah. Just relentlessly up for a very long time.
So the next stop was then the visitor center.
The next, there was one stop at just before you leave the residential area and it opens up into the ranch land, which is at maybe 45, maybe 4,000 feet, vertical feet or so. It is having ridden that road a whole bajillions of times. It's my favorite P stop on the way up, so that's why I picked it as an aid stop because it has a beautiful view of all of the island, and it's kind of there's a good like pull off like off the road. So met some of the crew there, for a couple minutes, and at that point also it's like the longer you stop, the more challenging it is to then get going again.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to keep that one relatively short as best I could and just get all the things I needed and keep moving. And then in my head, it was just like get into the park, just get into the park. And once I'm in the park, then I know it's still 12 miles and 3,000 feet, but it's also the gentlest average gradient from that point. And so I was like, that's just get into the park, just get into the park. Um, did and finally did, but I did have to take a side of the road poop before the visit before getting in because I
Oh
was not
no.
going to make it. I know, and I at that age stop at whatever 4,000 feet. I said I think I'm gonna have to. I can feel some bubble gut going on, and I think I'm confident I can make it to the visitor center bathroom. And then there was a sad moment when uh, some of the staff from Move Family Services they zoomed into the park already because they were getting that H stop set up, and I saw the cart coming back down. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And they leaned down. They said, "The bathrooms are closed at the visitor center." And
No.
I said, yep." So I pooped on the side of the road in the bushes.
How'd that go?
It happened. It's not my first rodeo doing that, and I'm confident it won't be my last rodeo doing that. But fortunately, someone had a little doggy bag and some wipes and everything, so we took care
Oh,
of that as best
beauty.
we could, which was great. Um, yep. So that happened and felt way better after that. Um, not like good, but better than I was. And then into the park, and then it became colder and windier and wetter, which was also
So it was raining
not
and
raining, but
misty.
just like yeah, we were just in the clouds and it was windy, and so everything just got kind of wet, just damp. Everything's damp, and you're at that point 7,000 feet plus, so it's cold. But
That
yeah,
adds to the mental challenge, I imagine.
it yes, yeah. Fingers started to get very cold, toes started to get very cold. Um, so the aid stop at the visitor center was also short and sweet, just to keep moving. Because also you're using so much energy just to pedal that it's hard to keep your body warm. Also, so fortunately had thought that through, had all the layers and put all those things on. And then so essentially the final chunk to the tip top, um, which took way longer than I wanted it to, but I expected that to be the case, given that I was at that point 180 miles in, and what 20,000 feet of climbing in. Um, uh, and that's another one where I really I don't remember any details except for like staring at that point. It was just Jake. Pete had turned around, so just staring at his wheel and feeling very thankful that I had someone just to stare at, because like as long as his wheel is moving, I just have to follow that, and that's the only thing that I have to think about. Here's a fun thing, Ben, that was I had not thought about, but of course makes all the logistical sense in the world, is that anybody of my friends who were coming to the summit to like celebrate, they had to pass me. And I don't know why I
Mm.
hadn't thought of that. But it just hadn't occurred to me that I'd be seeing all these people go to the summit. Um, and that was the biggest motivational push ever, was to have people driving past. And then Key and Hans, who friends here, they just went up and down next to us a few times, mostly just saying silly things. um, but that's also my personality. So it was super fun just to have that happen a few times. Um, yeah, Hobie is their dog, and Hobie was not there, but it was one of them that made me laugh out loud, which was really something at that point. But they were driving past, coming down the road, and Hans was leading out the driver's side, and he just said, "Do it for Hobie." And I lost it, which was a nice little mental breather for a second. But yeah, to start to see people go up to the top like that, knowing that I was riding for me, but I was riding for them also at that point. It was like I can't put a foot down. I have to just finish this thing because they're waiting for me. Um, that was a big one. That was a big one that kept me going.
Yeah, and it doesn't
Um,
take. Well, I think it's important to be able to have something to take your mind out of the dark and darkening hole that you find yourself in at that point in a ride like that. Probably
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
just
Just
to
have something to latch onto.
yeah, people who
That
have no idea what you're feeling and experiencing, maybe they can imagine it, but they're just like coming up from maybe having a nice relaxing Sunday and they're gonna celebrate you and they're screaming stuff out the car. Like that's a cool thing to have at that
yeah,
point.
that was special. Um, yeah. I also there was a in that final 13 miles or so. Jake and I had been chatting for a while going up, and then it got to a point where I was like, Jake, I don't have any. I can't talk anymore. Like I just need to pedal. And that's to get back to the just looking at his wheel. He was like, "All right, where do you want me in front or behind?" And I was like, Could I just stare at your wheel right ahead of me would be great." And so we didn't talk for like a couple of hours probably, as I just filled him up with the
Wow,
only
what a good
yeah
guy.
yeah he was a good dude.
And he
Um
just ran into him by coincidence.
yeah, well, through all of the like pushing this out into the ether, he is in I think it was through a Facebook group for Maui cycling,
like our Maui cycling community here. And he said he just caught wind of it and was following along and just wanted to be a part of it. And so just, yeah, drove up to that, to the beginning of Crater Road. And right from there, he was like, I'm going to the top. I'm going to the top with you. And I was like, okay, all right, great.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was nice.
So what
Yeah.
can you remember what was going through your head at this point, or was it not much other than like, oh, I can't wait for this to be done?
Yeah, it's mostly that at that point, to be very honest with you. There's not much energy for any other thoughts of things. And at that point, it's everything sucks, honestly. I mean, bubble gut is happening. Everything hurts a little bit. I'm cold. My shoulders are super tight. Just from being hunched over the whole time. Um, but at that point, it's also like I can't not finish this. I'm close enough that I know I can physically do this. It's just going to be brutal to get there. Um, and that's an interesting place to get to, I think, mentally. Because for a lot of any big ride, for a lot of it, it's like I don't know, like there's still so much ahead that I don't know about this. And then you get to a point where it's like I'm close enough that I know I can do it. Which is encouraging, but it doesn't make it happen any faster, unfortunately.
No. And
Yeah.
like you said earlier about you get to the last bit, you're almost there. It's almost mentally harder like the closer you get.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. It does get mentally hard the closer you get. Because you just want to be done at that point. It's like it's not beautiful anymore, especially at that point because you couldn't see anything because it was you were in a cloud.
Right.
So there's nothing to look at anymore except for just pedaling. I did have to let all my buddies know that I sought for another poop right at the first parking lot, which is only a half mile from the summit, but it's where the bathroom is. So there were people up waiting for me at the observation area already, and talking to them afterwards. There are people who saw me just pull off, and they're like, "Is he finishing there? What's going on?" And then they learn, no, he just has to poop. so, so I had to take care of business real quick, unfortunately, so that I could actually enjoy the celebration a little bit instead of just holding in a bad one. So that was that.
Well,
Probably.
yeah, I had a question on that because
Oh,
did
nice.
Jake
Yeah.
just
Let's dive into
yeah,
that.
yeah, did Jake just
He
like
waited.
hold your hair back or
No, he very kindly, again, we weren't really talking, but at some point I just said to him, I was like, dude, I have to go to the bathroom before that final kicker. I have to. And so I just peeled off and went in there, and he very kindly, he followed me, to where you like have to get off your bike to then walk. And he was like, just, I'm gonna hold your bike. You do what you gotta do. And I was like, thank you. Thank you so much. Yep. So I went and did that. And then, as you know from climbing the volcano, that last half mile is the steepest part of the whole thing, which is brutal because you can literally see the top. It's like 300 vertical feet away. But you have to, is a spirally half-mile road to get up there, and it is very steep. And that sucked more than any other part of the entire day for sure. However, uh, it was also one of the moments that I will remember, um, most clearly for forever as I think back on this ride, because it was in that final half stretch that all of the crew that I work with at Maui Sunriders, they, as it turned out, they finished work at 4, and I got to this. It's an hour and a half drive to the summit, and I finished at 5:30, so they had exactly enough time to get to the top, and they caught me right then. And
wow.
yeah, and to I could just hear shouting, like real and like intense, like people fired up. And I just looked over and I recognized Luke's truck. And I just saw them all like hanging out the windows and stuff, just going ballistic. And yeah, that did it. Um,
That's cool.
Yeah, that got me to the top. It was that crew coming up. Yeah, there was a burst of energy that I felt to push all the way through. At that point, it's less than a quarter mile left, but boy, is it hard to push through that. And they did it. They got me there. And that was it. That was a wrap.
And
Woo!
then you biked all the way down.
Oh God. No, definitely did not. Jake almost did though, and then all of us were like, what are you doing? It is freezing cold. You should not do
And
that.
darkening.
And it was getting dark. Yeah. So we gave him a ride down too. Yeah, zero interest in riding down that volcano at that point. Absolutely zero. Less than zero. I couldn't, yeah. But yeah, everyone was up there. It was a beautiful moment. It was short lived because everyone was freezing. And I finished and then immediately took layers off, like, and got a dry shirt on and put coats on and stuff. And within 3 or 4 minutes, I was shivering uncontrollably. And so I was like, okay, I should leave this place probably pretty soon. And yeah, and that was the wrap on the day, Ben.
And you had
Wow.
quite a crew up there to support you. Like what a neat way to finish versus what you could have just been solo up there, couple sunset watchers who don't know you, but you had a bunch of buddies, which is such a cool way
I had a
to
bunch of buddies. Yeah,
bring people
Dean
together.
from Amuba Family Services. He's the executive director, and oh man, he's a good dude. He just, as I was making that final little push, he was just shouting at the top of his lungs, kind of what I was doing, who I was and why I was doing this ride, and what it meant. And of course, I mean, watching the videos, he's so loud, but in the moment, I couldn't hear anything. It was just like, just finish. But because of that, like, everybody who was up there, just just the visitors up there, all like consolidated around around me. And all of a sudden, like, I finished, got the warm layers on, and turned around, and there must have been like 20 or 30 people. I knew like a third of them, and everyone was just staring at me, and everyone had their phones out, and then people just started firing off questions like it was a press conference.
Oh my
gosh,
gosh.
it was nuts.
Hey, Conor.
Yeah, people were like, "What's the cause? What are you riding for?" And then it was like, "What was the hardest part? Like, how was the ride?"
You're like, bruh, I'm a little tired.
Yeah, that was a wild one. And then all of a sudden, yeah, I did what I could to answer everything, and then people started kind of just, because it was also freezing and windy, kind of just like leaving. And then it was like, okay, yeah, let's get the heck out of here. It's cold. And then that's where the final poop comes in, because after all the energy of all that kind of wore off, it then became, oh my God, I have to go poop immediately. And it was coming on so strong. Yeah, so then had to delegate all the things, and I was like to all my buddies up there, can you take all of this stuff, and I need someone to drive me back down to the bathroom right now. Yeah, so my
Because
good friend,
there isn't one at the top, right?
there is not one in the observation area. You have to drive back down that little spiral for a half mile to get back to the main parking lot. Yep. So went and took care of business for what was that? 1, 2, 3, the fourth time over the course of the ride. And then climbed into the back of Raynell, who is her Jeep. She had put a little makeshift bed in the back of her Jeep, which was very nice. Yeah, and just laid down there for a while.
While she drove you down.
Yes, which was, in the moment, it felt amazing to just lie down in a warm car. But I also knew, I was like, oh, there's a lot of twists and turns that we're about to do here. This could get really interesting. And about 2 hairpins in, I had to be like, Raynell, can you stop the car? I need to get in the front seat. I feel horrible. So that was a short-lived experience, but it was lovely while it lasted.
Yeah.
Until it was horrible. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, then cruised all the way back down. Went to go see my sister, because again, it was her birthday.
And she
You had
was
to
out
go
with some
cook her
friends
dinner.
together. I had to cook her dinner. She would had a little get together at Mahalo Ale Works, and I swung by to say a quick hello. And I did eat a pizza there. It was I'll admit, it was really hard to eat. My body was not ready, even though in an interesting conundrum. All it needs is food at that point and energy, but it is incredibly difficult to get that down. So I struggled through pizza, but I did do it, and then immediately went to sleep when I got home. Woo!
Wow. And
Yikes!
then did you wake up incredibly hungry
Not
or
in the
no?
immediate, but it my appetite came back, which I have experienced after other very long rides like this. It when it comes back, it happens slowly, but then it only gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So yeah, woke up and just put a bagel in the toaster because I knew I still didn't feel that hungry, but the second I like took a bite of it, it was like, oh boy, wow, here we go. So bagel and egg, and then immediately after that made a stack of pancakes, had a stack of pancakes, and then just lied on the couch for about 3 hours. And that was the first time that I actually went back through all the social media stuff because I didn't have my phone after the ride. It got lost in a bag somewhere, and so I didn't do anything with it until the following day.
Mm.
So I just laid for a while. Naomi, who I mentioned earlier, she brought down a pizza that she and Ollie made the day before, and some soba noodles, which was very kind of her because the last thing I wanted to do was cook at that point. Um, and the second I saw this was around lunchtime, the second I saw the soba noodles, all I could think about was soy sauce. And I was craving soy sauce in a way that I haven't craved a food item in a very long time. And I think it was just my body needing salt. And so I just drowned those bad boys in soy sauce and took them down. Ugh. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
What was your approach to your legs? Because I imagine sitting in a because you get to the top. I'm just imagining you're
Mm-hmm.
cold, you get cold, then you're locked in a seat in the passenger seat of a car for 90 minutes on the way down, and then
Mm-hmm.
probably when you get back, the last thing you want to do is stretch or anything like that. Like how did your body respond to this whole thing?
Um, yeah, I did not do any sort of proactive recovery on the night like after the ride.
Which is
I was
totally
yeah,
understandable.
I
Like
was
I
too
don't think
tired
anyone
to do any
would.
of that. Um, Honestly, legs felt pretty. I mean, they were definitely tender little chickens for a little while, but way less than I would have anticipated. Um, but I will say the second like I started to walking around was okay, and then like starting to bend down to like do anything and like engaging the muscles of my legs, that was a big challenge, mostly just for Monday. But that was hard. I did toward the end of the day, finally, when I motivated getting off the couch, I did some restorative yoga, and boy, oh boy, is that a dreamy experience. It's just,
Mm,
oh man, can't get enough of that. Do
yeah.
that every day. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe should do it every day, actually.
Probably.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's hard. Can't do everything.
Can't do everything. No. But
So now it's been
yeah.
almost a week, huh? And you said that you're still feeling tired, right?
Yeah, I was pretty exhausted mentally Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I was back at the bike shop working, but I have to say it was very hard to focus on anything. And I think a piece of that was the obviously the ride, but then also being so focused on the execution of this ride and the planning of it for like 5 weeks, and then all of a sudden the stress of that was gone, and it was like, oh man, I don't want to focus on anything for a little while. So yeah, Friday I felt like kind of 100%, not 100%, but I felt like a normal person again. But then had some intervals on a training ride yesterday that was a we were kind of testing where I was physically, and I'm definitely not all the way back. And then today was just a long ride, nothing dramatic in terms of intensity, but just a long one. And it was also like, oh wow, my body still hurts pretty good. So it takes a while, but
Right.
boy, is it worth it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, well, so you talked about how the last bit of the ride was really hard and you were excited for it to be like just to finish it and get it done and it sucked. So what's the like why do you enjoy getting yourself to a place like that and what keeps you going back to wanting to do more of these?
That's a good question. I love pushing myself. I love seeing. I'm so curious about the limits of my own physical capacity and mental capacity in that regard. Um, and so that's like the physical piece of it, but then there's also the adventure piece of it for me, which is like how you can go some unbelievable places and cover some crazy distances on a bike. And it's like seeing what other people can do. It's like, oh, could I do something like that? Like, what would that feel like if I did that? Um, yeah, and every now having done what like two 24-hour rides and then this bad Larry. Yeah, you finish them and it's uh everything hurts and it's brutal, but there's also every time there's been a piece of me that's like I know that I could have gone a little bit farther. That wasn't the limit. It was brutal and it
Right.
sucked, but like there's more in there. And now it's like refining the process of being able to take on something like that. And it's like, wow, if you really plan these things out and focus and train, your body's capable of so much more than anyone thinks that it is. It's just like, yeah, taking the carving the time out to go do it. Um, and that's all the me kind of piece of it. But then it's like having now been deeper into the cycling stuff for a while and talking to other people about it and having people like it's wild to think that I am someone who might inspire others to drive themselves to do things like that. I don't think maybe not that scope, but to push them to do a little bit more than they thought they could do. Because that's all I'm doing. I've just been doing it for maybe a little bit longer than the average person. And so the scale is different, but the experience is not. The experience is the same. And so for someone else to push from like a 20-mile ride around wherever they live to like, oh, maybe I can go to the next town over and make this like a 30-mile ride. That incremental change and that step that they take is the same sort of mental challenge that I face when I take on something that's way longer than what I normally do. The scale is different, but the experience is not. And it's really I love being in a place where I think I can drive others hopefully and inspire them to take on some of these challenges to realize that they can do more than they thought they could do also you know and that's why I am staying so engaged with all this because yeah, I feel totally exhausted this past week, but I also feel more fulfilled in regards to riding bikes and what that has done for me and for others. I feel more fulfilled now than I have after any other super long ride that I've done because this one, yeah, it was a solo effort, but there was so much community surrounding this one. And that's why I like doing it. It's bringing people into it. It's yeah, it's fun. And I like to think that other people think it's kind of fun too and kind of cuckoo.
Yeah, I mean, you had a great community of people following along with the adventure, and you did a great thing for the Imua family community. How did everything wrap up with fundraising for that?
Uh, just shy of $6,100. I do believe someone just donated yesterday, which was very nice. A few days out. But yeah, I mean, initial goal of 2,500, and I thought that was kind of a long shot because I had no idea what the heck I was doing. Um, yeah, and by golly, $6,100 is kind of nuts. Um, yeah, and it'll be fun to watch because I've asked if I could. I I want the those, especially particularly right now, it's her program, the Dream and Move program. But I was like, people who are invested in this, people have been asking me like, where does the money go and who's it helping? I was like, can we find a way to promote and to like share the stories of these kids in the immediate who are directly benefiting from the money that we raised? And she was like, oh, for sure, we can find a way to do that it'll be through social media stuff. But she's like, yeah, assuming kids and families are okay with it, then we'll be happy to share all that stuff, and that'd be really cool to see, and I feel like we really helped. The money's yeah. I love riding my bike, but it's this is unique for me so far in that is riding a bike and doing something good, for
Yeah.
the local community here.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you did a great job, and I think you've uh, you've tapped into a lot of your strengths and skills that you've been working on, not only the bike riding, but the social media aspect and just getting people excited about a specific thing. And I think that paid off in you can see that in how successful you were with the following along, the fundraising, and now
Yeah.
how much awareness has been raised for this cause. So I hope you feel good about that, Connor, because you did
I
great
do,
work.
Ben. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, it was a heck of a fun project. That really spiraled into something far larger than I thought it ever would. Um, but yeah, I think a testament to hard work and yeah, I don't know, others' hard work also. It wasn't just me putting this all out there. There's a few others who helped out along the way. Um, Team effort, solo ride, but team effort doesn't happen alone.
Right. It's
Yeah.
hard work, and it's something that you believed in and were passionate about. And I think that makes it, people are way more willing to help you, it seemed like. And it probably felt less like work than it could have otherwise felt.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Yeah, feeling very, very content over here. Very, yeah, proud and humbled by the whole experience also. It hasn't totally settled or like sunk in, but talking it through like this is I think actually been very helpful in the processing
The processing.
realm. Hmm.
So you mentioned that one of your buddies is potentially going to put together a video.
Hmm.
Do you have any sort of sense of timeline or expectation for that?
Not really timeline other than I'm gonna go meet him tomorrow afternoon. And I think more or less have a similar conversation that you and I are having, where he has some questions and he wants to interview and film the interview, which would be kind of interesting. And then I'm just gonna give him all of the footage that I've collected from anything that I took, but also from what Holden took and from a few others who were out there, and just give it all to him. And he just, yeah, he very kindly was like, I'll donate my time to put together a sweet video to like, yeah, to share this adventure and this experience and this cause with everybody. Um, so I don't know. I will keep you posted with timeline, but I have no idea. He's doing it out of the goodness of his own heart. So I will kind of let him, take the lead on timing.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing that one.
As will I. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be a cool way to help you look back on it and continue to process it, and probably help you look ahead and feel excited to what's next, which is going to be what, Connor?
Oh, golly gee willikers, I don't rightly know. I had somebody ask if they said they would next year they would donate $1,000 if I could circumnavigate the Big Island and then climb Mauna Kea, but that is like 10 times harder. So I haven't even mapped that. I'm going to map it because I'm just curious what the metrics are. But for those who don't know, Mauna Kea is zero sea level to 14,000 feet over 46 miles. So that's an even bigger, steeper climb. And the Big
That
Island's
in
like,
itself is
yeah,
crazy.
right. Just that is nuts. And the island is as big as every other Hawaiian island combined. So like I don't know if that's really possible, but I am
For
curious.
$1,000 donating to a good, I mean, it's for a good cause, and maybe they should sweeten the deal.
It's for a good cause. Yeah. Maybe I'll map it right now just out of curiosity. But I don't know. It's
I
way too
think
soon to have something on paper for a next challenge.
yeah, right. Right.
Gotta fully
Well,
digest this one first.
I know. Yeah, but I mean, you're also getting back to because you have a season of races that's definitely on the horizon that you're back to
Yep.
training for.
Yep. Yeah. So this was a big from a cycling perspective, this was a big off-season goal, was to pull off a big ride all around Maui. And then so some racing in Oregon in April and May. And then hopefully a couple of races on the East Coast while I'm out there in June. And then I'll be Boulder based July, August, probably September, and have a few races out there. And I think the big one, well, I know the big one will be the Gravel World's Long Voyage, Ben, August 23rd, 24th, which is a 300 miler. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have the capacity to like do a building community into that, aside from just maybe trying to just share the experience of that. But because that will be a competitive one, and I've never done one of these ultra rides in a competitive environment. But that seems, yeah, that'll be interesting. I got in touch with the guy who runs Gravel Worlds. Came out to Maui, and I went for a ride with him, so I know him a little bit. And then their primary sponsor is Panaracer, and I am fortunate to be a Panaracer ambassador this year. So between those two connections, it seems like kind of a no-brainer, as I wanted to do an ultra long competitive event this summer, and those two things line up beautifully. So that's the big one for this summer. Yep.
Well, we've talked about it a little bit offhandedly, but a few friends of ours and us are planning on attempting the old climbing up Mount Everest, the highest
That's
paved road
right.
in the world, up Mount Everest.
I forgot they paved that one.
Yeah, just a couple years ago. You need
Yes.
4-wheel drive. That's the only requirement.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Pack some water. No, we're attempting what's called Everesting, which you've done on a ride previously. But on the solstice, which I think, well, it'll definitely be a huge challenge, and I think could be a great way to bring some good into the world.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ben. I think we'll do some brainstorming on how to make that a more community engaged thing somehow. But yeah, June 21st, everybody. Ben and I and our friends Matt and Jeff will be climbing 29,000 vertical feet up and down the slopes of Mount Greylock in Massachusetts, the highest point in Massachusetts, which is what, maybe 10 laps? I haven't even done the math yet. Have you?
I think it's more than 10. I mean, it depends on where we start, but I think it's going to be 12 or 13, which is a good number.
But we'll have more daylight on that day than any other day of the year, so we'll be fine.
True. It's true.
Yep. It's true.
But all in good time. In the meantime, Connor, thank you for sharing your time for a good cause on this bike ride, and for sharing the stories of the road with the lovely people of the Eyes Up Life community.
Right on, Ben. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm excited to continue to follow all of your adventures and spreading the good word of living an eyes up life. Because by golly, we need that now in this world too. Keep doing you.
Well, if you made it this far, you deserve a cookie, because that's a long time to listen to me and Connor babble on about bikes and stuff, but hopefully it was enjoyable. Maybe you listened to it in the car, maybe you listened to it on a run, maybe you listened to it just for fun. And I am going into poetry as a side hustle, so send me a Venmo if you want some poetry. This was a nice special edition episode of the Eyes Up Life podcast, featuring me, Ben Granis, and my good friend Conor O'Brien. You can follow Conor on Instagram. Just search Conor, 1N, O apostrophe Brian. He's the one with the bike. And make sure you follow this podcast wherever you're listening to it, Eyes Up Life, and give Eyes Up Ride a follow on Instagram. We'd appreciate it. I would appreciate it, because it's just me. I don't know why people say we when it's just a one-man show. We'll catch you next time. Not sure when I'm going to put this up, so stay tuned for the next Maxxis athlete interview. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Stay safe. Turn on Do Not Disturb while driving. If you haven't done that yet, head on over to eyesupride.com/resources to learn how. If you have questions further, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help. Take care. Bye-bye.